Many things are still a baffling mystery in our world. Science doesn't quite yet have all the answers or all the keys to unlock the secrets of our universe. Every day somewhere someone sees something they can't explain. Something that we're told is not there, is not real, or simply doesn't exist. Too many reliable people tell of sightings and encounters with the unknown. The myths, legends, folklore, and old wives' tales are usually based in fact and in reality. When a witness to such a strange encounter finds no one believes them and faces ridicule from people they trust and love, they turn to us, the Alabama Bigfoot Society. From the heart of the South, this is Alabama Adventures. Hello and welcome once again to this Alabama adventure. Tonight down here in Alabama, it's getting close to Halloween of 2016, so I thought I would tell you a ghost story. And this is a true ghost story that happened to someone, a man that I have known all his life, known very well. And he told me this story a while back. I wanted to get him to do the interview and maybe not put his face on, but we all know how ridicule and that type of stuff goes with the paranormal. So he didn't even want his voice to be on. He wanted me to tell the story that happened to him. So that's what I'm going to try to do tonight on this ghostly Alabama adventure. Okay, now so as always, I'm going to try to set a little background so you'll sort of have an idea of what's going on and where. It was in central Alabama. That's all I'll say because there were 3 people that were tragically killed in this automobile accident that I'm about to tell you about. The man that told me was training to be a funeral director. He was working at a funeral home when this happened, and he was in training. So this actually happened to him, so that's what I'm going to tell you about. Now, this ghostly tale does deal with the death of 3 people, and 2 of those people are going to be children. So if you don't want your children to watch this or listen to it, it would be a time to stop the video or to pause it until they're not in the room, until you hear it and decide if you want them to listen to it or not. I just wanted to put that little warning in there to begin with, that it does deal with the death of 2 children. Anyway, what had happened was this mother and her 2 children, I believe they were 8 and 9 years old, and they were one Saturday morning were on the way to a baseball game. The 2 boys were going to be playing in Little League, or I'm not sure exactly what type of baseball it was, but they had a baseball game this Saturday morning, and the mother was carrying them to the school where the game was going to be played. And they lived kind of out in the country, and as she neared a stop sign, of course, she stopped and looked both ways, and there was nothing coming, and she pulled into the intersection. And as she did, this drunk driver, drunk at this early hour of the morning, I guess, from what I was told, had been drunk all night long. But anyway, this drunk driver ran this 4-way stop sign, and as her car pulled into the intersection, and he came through the intersection at what was estimated around 80 to 90 miles an hour, or so the police report that this young man had told me about claimed that's how fast he was going, and I guess he should know because he was undertaker or the one of the funeral directors, and I guess he had access to all that type of information. But anyway, when this drunk driver hit this car with this lady and her 2 children, the woman was in the front seat, and the 2 boys were in the back seat, and they all 3 did have on seat belts. Anyway, whenever the crash occurred, the drunk driver hit their car with such a force and such a speed that it actually cut the car half in 2, was what this funeral director told me. The car was actually cut half in 2, and all three passengers were killed. The mother and her two sons were killed instantly in this accident, which I guess if they had to die that morning, that's the best way, is to die without a lot of pain and be killed instantly. And it's just a terrible tragedy that that this family was killed by a drunk driver who survived the crash, of course, because he was drunk. Not only that, something else I want to add to it that the undertaker or the funeral director, whatever you want to call it, told me was that this man, the county that he lived in, he had been stopped several times and charged with DUI. Well, no, he hadn't really been charged with it. He had been caught several times DUI, but because of who he was in the county, his family had paid his way out, and he had never been in prison being caught DUI. But finally, he finally killed these three people, and I'm not sure if he was charged with anything then, or if he managed to pay his way out of that. But sometimes that's just the way things work, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing that you can do about it. But anyway, this whenever the police and the state troopers and everything arrived on the scene, they did pronounce these three dead, and the family, of course, was notified, and the local funeral home was notified. So that was this particular man's job that told me the story. He went out with the other funeral directors and picked up the bodies, I guess would be the best way to put it. But for some reason, or it may be mandatory, I'm not sure, whenever you're in an auto accident and killed, they had to be carried to Montgomery, I believe, to the state crime lab for autopsy. Let me correct that. It was not the state crime lab. It was the state forensics lab where they had to be carried. That's why I wanted this guy to tell the story. He knows a whole lot more details and what everything's called than I do in this story. But anyway, this was this young man's job. I'm not sure if they put him in body bags or what, because he said all three bodies were terribly torn up. Anyway, he carried them to Montgomery without incidents or anything, and of course they had to be left there for, I don't know, a day or two or three, whatever it takes to for them to autopsy the bodies. And they had three that they had to do the autopsies on. Anyway, they got a call or notification from the state forensic lab that they had finished their work, and the funeral home could come pick up the bodies. So that was his job, as I said, and that's what he did. He went to Montgomery in the hearse and picked up the three bodies. Now, here's where the ghostly part of the story begins now. He said that on the way back, said they had been out of Montgomery for a pretty good while, and he was coming back up the road. I won't say to what city, but said he was on the road bringing the three bodies back to the funeral home. And he said he noticed, said to begin with, he could hear a voice. It was kind of low, but he could tell that it was kind of an angry type voice, and it was a female voice. And he couldn't understand what it was, and he checked the radio to make sure the radio wasn't on. And of course it wasn't, but he came on down the road, and he said the voice began getting a little louder and a little louder and a little more plainer as he came on up the road. And then he said that he could actually hear this woman yelling, what's going on, and what's happening, and where are we, and this type of stuff. And he says as he come on up the road, that the voice was coming from the passenger seat in the hearse that he was driving. And he said, of course, he knew that there was nobody in there but these three bodies, and that they were certainly dead, so he knew that it wasn't them. But anyway, after he came on up the road and he kept hearing this, he looked over into the passenger seat, and he said he could see this cloudy, dark figure of a person in the passenger seat with him. But he was just one of those kind of people that ghost and this type of stuff didn't bother. Matter of fact, he had been around me a lot, and I was always into the paranormal stuff. He and I were very good friends, and I guess he was kind of used to coming in contact with ghosts and other paranormal type stuff. But he said he came on up the road, and this woman was very angry and was wanting to know who he was and where they were and what was happening and this kind of stuff. And said after a little while, this cloud or this dark shape just disappeared. Well, they got on back to the funeral home, and I'm not sure what all goes on in the funeral home and how things work there. But he said he and some other funeral directors were preparing the bodies. I believe that was how he put it. And he said at one point he was left in the room with all three by himself, and they were working on one of the young boys, embalming him. And he said at the foot of the table that this figure began to appear. And he said he didn't really think too much about this figure appearing, because he said many times when he was working on the body that the person or the spirit or the soul of that person that he was working on, he said many times had stood like at the foot of the table to where they embalm you, and had watched the embalmers embalm the body. And he said that he just always, he kind of referred back to me and things I had told him and things that me and him had seen. And as a matter of fact, he is a member of the Alabama Bigfoot Society, so he was into the paranormal type stuff and was kind of used to it or ready for it or whatever you want to call it. But he said this woman began to appear and said now she was angry. Said was just very mad. What were they doing to her? What were they doing to her babies? And why were they there? And who was he? And just all type of questions. And he said he just kept working on the body, and said after a little while that this mother became very angry, and she said she began to cuss at him, wanting to know like what the hell are you doing, and just all type of very angry. She couldn't understand it, what was happening, what it was. I told him later what had happened, that they were killed so quickly, and it probably wasn't their exact time to die, that she and her children were dead at this time. But anyway, he said they went on and prepared the bodies, and they prepared this woman and put them in the caskets, and said, I believe it was the next day when they had all three funerals in, I'm not sure if it was in a chapel or if it was in the chapel at the funeral home. But anyway, they had all three funerals at the same time, and they had three hearse that led the funeral procession to the cemetery, where all three were buried side by side. Okay, now they got them buried like this afternoon, and he said then that night, whenever he went to bed and was trying after he went to sleep, said that he dreamed about this lady. This lady came to him in his dream, and she was still very angry, and she was still cussing and just raising Cain about what had happened to them and what was going on. And as I said, just all these same questions over and over. Well, he continued to work, and he continued to have this same dream or a similar dream almost every night. This lady would come to him in his dreams, just raising Cain about what had happened and what he had done and all this type of stuff. This dreaming, he said, went on for about a month, and said he had about got to where he could not sleep. He hated to go to bed every night. He just couldn't rest, because this woman was in his dreams all night long, and would wake him up all during the night when he was having this dream. But anyway, he came to me and told me about what all was going on, and what did I recommend that he should do. Anyway, I met him at a huddle house one night. I believe it was either that night or the next night. I met him in a huddle house and told him what I felt like he should do. I told him that I felt like he should go to the cemetery where this lady and her two sons were buried, and just as if he was talking to me or anybody else, explain to her what happened about the wreck, explain to her what happened about having to go to Montgomery for the autopsies and everything, and that they were all three instantly killed in this wreck. He was sorry about it and this type of stuff, but they had to be buried. They all unfortunately died at the same time, and just explained to her, just like she was sitting there on the tombstone listening to you, what happened and what all he did and why, and tell her. I said the last thing I believe I would tell her is that unfortunately she was dead, and tell her that they all three died instantly without pain, and to please not come to you anymore in your dreams and that type of stuff, because it certainly was not your fault. That if she wanted to go to anybody, she should find the driver that killed him. And I told him to tell her who he was and where he lived, and maybe she did. But anyway, he said after that afternoon, the next day, he went out to the cemetery and said that was exactly what he did. He told her what had happened and who it was that had actually killed him and this type of stuff. And he said after that, he has never had to dream again. This happened about 2.5 or 3 years ago. A lot of times when I see him, I ask him, has this particular lady come back to him in his dream? And he says after he went to the cemetery and explained to her what had happened, that he has never been bothered by her again. So anyway, that was tonight's Alabama adventure. It was a little quick ghost story that happened here in Alabama, and I hope you enjoyed it. And as I always do, I'd like to say hello to my granddaughter Madison, and happy Halloween to her. And would like to tell you that the Alabama Bigfoot Society is run completely out of pocket. And if you could see your way to make a donation, or if you would like to make a donation, just go to our website, alabamabigfootsociety.com, and you'll find a place on the front page to where you can make a donation if you can, or if you would like to. Also, if you like this video, I would like for you to give us a like. And if you like what we're doing down here in Alabama with our paranormal investigations and that type of stuff, would like you to subscribe to the channel. Would also like to tell you to check out our items for sale page on our website. We've added several new items on there lately, and maybe you'll find something that you just can't live without. Anyway, with all that being said, I guess I'll see you next time on the next Alabama Adventure.